Have you ever felt an inexplicable familiarity with someone you've just met? That strange sensation of, I know you from somewhere despite being certain your paths have never crossed? Or perhaps you've noticed patterns in your relationships, attracting the same types of romantic partners, friends, or even conflicts throughout your life, as if the universe keeps presenting you with the same lesson wrapped in different packaging. These recurring patterns often feel like cosmic coincidences or cruel tricks of fate. But what if they reveal something profound about our psychology and the unconscious forces shaping our connections? Carl Jung, the renowned Swiss psychiatrist, offered revolutionary insights that might forever change how you view the people who drift in and out of your life. Today, we're diving deep into one of Jung's most fascinating concepts, one that explains why certain people feel so familiar, why others trigger us instantly, and what these encounters reveal about our unconscious mind. Because understanding why we keep meeting the same souls in different bodies isn't just psychological curiosity. It's a key to unlocking deeper self-awareness and breaking destructive patterns that may have followed you for years. Imagine you're not actually seeing people as they are, but through a lens colored by your own unconscious mind. This is what Jung called projection, a psychological mechanism where we unconsciously attribute our own unacknowledged qualities to others. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate, Jung famously stated. Think about that colleague who irritates you beyond reason. Their confidence feels like arrogance, their directness like rudeness. According to Jung, intense emotional reactions often signal that someone is displaying traits you've repressed in yourself. The qualities that trigger us most powerfully are frequently those we've disowned within ourselves. What makes projection fascinating is how specific it becomes. It's not just general traits like selfishness or kindness that we project, but qualities shaped by our unique psychological history. This explains why two people can have completely different responses to the same individual. They're not actually perceiving the same qualities. A therapy client couldn't stand her new coworker. Something about his self-assured manner set her teeth on edge. Months later, she realized what had triggered her. He embodied a confidence she'd been taught to suppress as a child when told not to show off. Her irritation wasn't about him. It was about her own disowned confidence-seeking expression. This raises profound epistemological questions. How can we trust our perceptions of others when they're so colored by projection? How reliable is our self-knowledge when examining our own projections? The very act of observing our projections changes them, creating what philosophers might call an observer effect in consciousness. Just as quantum particles behave differently when observed, our unconscious material transforms through the act of conscious attention. Projection operates with remarkable subtlety, feeling entirely objective in the moment. The intensity of our reaction often reflects how deeply we've buried the projected quality. When we understand this mechanism, everyday interactions transform into opportunities for self-discovery. That surge of admiration, that flash of irritation, that inexplicable attraction, all become doorways to understanding disowned aspects of ourselves. But projection isn't limited to negative traits. It works in both directions, creating patterns of attraction as well as aversion. That charismatic friend who easily commands a room might represent your own untapped leadership potential. The creative soul whose artistic expression moves you might be awakening your dormant creativity. These positive projections explain why certain people feel like sunshine in human form. They're illuminating golden aspects of yourself you've forgotten or never fully claimed. At the heart of Jung's understanding lies his revolutionary concept of the shadow, those disowned aspects of ourselves that we've repressed, denied, or hidden from conscious awareness. The shadow contains qualities we've decided don't belong in our self-image, often based on family or cultural messaging. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Jung noted, The shadow develops throughout our lives, beginning in childhood when we learn which behaviors earn approval and which provoke rejection. To maintain connection with caregivers and society, we gradually suppress aspects deemed unacceptable. The more rigid or conditional the approval we received, the more substantial our shadow often becomes. What's particularly fascinating is how our shadows manifest in relationships. Think about your own patterns. Do you repeatedly encounter controlling bosses, partners who can't commit, friends who betray your trust? These recurring characters aren't appearing by chance, but are manifestations of unresolved complexes, emotionally charged clusters of memories and associations around core patterns established early in life. What makes shadow dynamics especially persistent is their unconscious nature. You can change cities, careers, or social circles, yet somehow find yourself encountering the same essential character types and relational patterns. This persistence points to something beyond coincidence, an internal psychological mechanism actively recreating familiar scenarios. Consider Maya, who consistently found herself in friendships where she gave endlessly while receiving little in return. Different people, same dynamic. Through therapy, she recognized her unconscious pattern. She was choosing people who wouldn't demand reciprocity because she was deeply uncomfortable receiving care from others. Her selfless giving wasn't purely altruistic. It was a strategy to control relationships and avoid vulnerability. This perspective raises ethical questions rarely addressed in psychological frameworks. Do we have a moral responsibility to become aware of our projections and shadow material? Is there an ethical imperative to acknowledge how our unconscious patterns might harm others or perpetuate unhealthy dynamics? When we project our shadow onto others, we often treat them as screens for our psychological material, rather than as full individuals deserving of recognition. Some philosophers might argue we have an ethical obligation to engage in this self-examination as part of respecting others' autonomy and personhood. The shadow doesn't just manifest in people who annoy us, it also appears in those we're mysteriously drawn to. Have you ever felt an immediate, powerful attraction that transcended logical explanation? Jung might suggest you're encountering positive shadow qualities, aspects of yourself you've disconnected from, but long to reclaim. These magnetic attractions carry important psychological information. They often point toward wholeness, qualities we need to integrate to become more complete. What draws us so powerfully to certain people is often the unconscious recognition of our own disowned potential. We're attracted not just to the person, but to what they awaken in us, portions of our authentic self we've lost connection with. Jung observed that complexes, those emotionally charged clusters of ideas and memories, function almost like independent personalities within us. They have their own agendas and energy, operating outside our conscious awareness while powerfully influencing our choices. Think of complexes as invisible scripts running in the background of your mind. You might consciously want healthy, balanced relationships, but if you carry an abandonment complex from childhood, you'll unconsciously create or be drawn to situations where that fear can play out. These complexes don't just influence our partner choices, they shape our interpretations, behaviors, and emotional responses. Someone with an abandonment complex might react with disproportionate anxiety to a missed text message. Someone with a betrayal complex might perceive innocent actions as evidence of deception. What gives complexes their power is their autonomy. They operate like sub-personalities with their own emotional charge, behavioral patterns, and perceptual filters. When triggered, they temporarily take over, making us react in ways that later leave us wondering, why did I do that? This explains why intelligent, self-aware people can still find themselves caught in seemingly irrational relationship patterns. The insidious aspect of these complexes is how they distort perception itself. Someone with a rejection complex might interpret neutral behavior as dismissive. Someone with an authority complex might experience firm boundaries as controlling. These perceptions feel completely real because the complex filters our experience before it reaches consciousness. We cannot change anything until we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses, Jung emphasized. Sarah noticed she kept encountering narcissistic men in her dating life, different backgrounds and personalities, yet all ultimately revealed self-centered tendencies. Through coaching work, she recognized how this pattern connected to her relationship with her charming but self-absorbed father. She had developed a complex around being the supportive one who set aside her own needs, a role she unconsciously recreated in her adult relationships. This pattern didn't just influence whom Sarah was attracted to, it affected how she behaved, consistently sending signals that she would tolerate self-centered behavior and prioritize others' needs above her own. Without realizing it, she was co-creating the very dynamic she consciously wanted to avoid. What's often overlooked in discussing these psychological patterns is how they're embodied, not just mental constructs. Our complexes manifest physically through tension patterns, nervous system responses, and somatic markers that guide our attractions and aversions. The mind-body connection reveals how our psychological patterns become literally incorporated into our physical being, influencing everything from posture to breathing to immune function when we encounter triggering relationships. When we experience strong attraction or aversion to someone, our bodies often react before our conscious minds. Heart rate increases, breathing patterns shift, muscles tense or relax. These physiological responses aren't random, but reflect deeply encoded relational patterns. The philosopher Maurice Merleau-Ponty described the body as our primary means of experiencing and understanding the world. Our relationship patterns are not just conceptual, but lived through our embodied experience. While Jung focused primarily on individual psychology, it's crucial to recognize how our personal unconscious is shaped by broader social forces. Our complexes and shadow material don't develop in isolation, but are influenced by cultural narratives, power structures, and social expectations. Consider how racism, gender inequality, classism, and other systemic inequalities shape what gets relegated to our shadow. In patriarchal societies, women often repress anger and assertiveness, while men suppress vulnerability and emotional expression. These aren't merely personal choices, but adaptations to social reward systems that begin in childhood. For example, a woman who repeatedly encounters men who dismiss her ideas might be experiencing not just personal projection, but the reflection of broader social patterns devaluing female voices. A Black professional who consistently meets white colleagues who seem uncomfortable around them may be encountering not just individual psychology, but systemic racial dynamics. The sociopolitical dimension of shadow work raises important questions. Can we fully address our relationship patterns without examining the social structures that shape them? How do power dynamics in society influence which aspects of ourselves become shadow material? Jung's framework, while revolutionary, sometimes neglected these systemic dimensions, focusing more on individual psychology than social context. Beyond individual and social dimensions, Jung proposed something even more profound: the collective unconscious, a layer of unconscious mind shared among all humans containing universal patterns he called archetypes. These archetypes manifest as recurring characters across all cultures: the hero, the mother, the trickster, the wise elder. When we encounter people who embody these archetypal energies, we often feel a powerful resonance that transcends ordinary explanation. What distinguishes archetypal encounters from personal projections is their numinous quality. They feel significant or destined, as if holding meaning beyond ordinary connection. There's a sense of recognition that transcends personal history, touching something ancient and collective within us. In all chaos, there is a cosmos, in all disorder, a secret order, Jung observed. These archetypal encounters often seem to arrive precisely when their particular energy is needed for our development. The mentor appears when we need wisdom. The challenger emerges when we've grown too comfortable. Understanding this dimension helps explain why certain connections affect us so deeply. They're engaging not just with our personal history, but with the collective patterns of human experience. This introduces fascinating metaphysical questions. What ontological status do these archetypes have? Are they merely useful conceptual constructs, biological inheritance encoded in our neural structures, or something that transcends materialist explanations altogether? Jung's framework challenges conventional Western metaphysics and invites consideration of alternative models of reality. Recent advances in neuroscience provide validation for Jung's insights. Studies in interpersonal neurobiology show that our early relationships create neural pathways that shape perception and behavior throughout life. Attachment theory demonstrates how early bonding experiences create internal working models that guide expectations in adult relationships, paralleling Jung's concept of complexes. Brain imaging studies reveal how powerfully these early patterns influence perception. We literally see others through the filter of past experiences, with the amygdala activating in similar patterns, whether we're with original attachment figures or people who trigger similar emotional responses. The neuroscientist Antonio Damasio's work on somatic markers provides further validation, showing how emotional memories become encoded in bodily responses that guide our unconscious decision-making, especially in relationships. When we feel drawn to someone who will ultimately recreate a familiar, painful dynamic, it may be our somatic markers guiding us toward the familiar, even when consciously we want something different. Neuroplasticity research offers hope for changing these patterns. When we consciously work with our projections, we create new neural pathways that gradually override automatic responses. Each time we respond differently to a familiar trigger, we're literally rewiring our brain's relational circuitry. The good news from neuroscience is the brain's remarkable plasticity. Its ability to form new neural pathways through conscious awareness and repeated new experiences. This scientific finding affirms Jung's belief that bringing unconscious patterns into consciousness creates the possibility for transformation. Beyond Jung's framework, other philosophical traditions offer complementary perspectives. Eastern philosophies approach recurring relationships through concepts of karma and spiritual lessons. In Buddhist thought, patterns that repeat might be viewed as karmic entanglements, opportunities to resolve unfinished business from past encounters. The Buddha taught that liberation comes through breaking cycles of attachment and aversion, similar to Jung's concept of resolving projections. To understand everything is to forgive everything, as the Hindu saying goes, suggesting that seeing the deeper pattern dissolves judgment. Western philosophical traditions also contribute valuable perspectives. Martin Buber distinguished between I-it relationships, relating to others as objects fulfilling our needs, and I-thou relationships, authentic encounters between subjects. Recurring patterns often exemplify I-it dynamics. We're not truly meeting the other person, but relating to projections and expectations. French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre explored how we cast others into roles serving our psychological narratives. In his existentialist framework, these patterns represent bad faith, avoiding the responsibility of authentic choice by following unconscious scripts. Like Jung, he suggested freedom comes through awareness and conscious choice-making. Contemporary philosopher Alain de Botton offers a complementary perspective that bridges psychology and philosophy. De Botton suggests we have an unconscious marriage bureau, matching us with people who replicate our childhood wounds, not because we enjoy suffering, but because these patterns feel like home. We recreate in adult relationships scenarios from childhood, he notes, not out of masochism, but out of a deep-seated need to heal old hurts. Jung believed that psychological development wasn't just about functioning well in society, but achieving individuation, becoming more complete by integrating conscious and unconscious aspects of your psyche. As this integration progresses, you stop meeting the same people in different faces because you're no longer unconsciously seeking certain dynamics. The journey from unconscious repetition to conscious choice requires several key practices. First, develop awareness of your relationship patterns. What roles do you typically play? What unresolved needs might these patterns express? Look for the emotional signature, the familiar feeling that emerges in seemingly different relationships. This pattern recognition isn't about simple categorization, but about identifying the emotional core of recurring dynamics. Beyond surface differences in people's appearances, backgrounds, or personalities, there's often a consistent emotional theme. Perhaps feeling unseen, controlled, abandoned, or inadequate. Recognizing this emotional signature is key to identifying your complexes. Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people, Jung maintained. Second, pay attention to emotional triggers. When someone provokes an intense reaction, pause and get curious. Might this represent a projection of your own disowned qualities? These triggers often appear as disproportionate reactions, responses exceeding what the situation warrants. The intensity itself is a clue, signaling that something beyond the present moment is being activated. Thomas, generally easygoing, found himself inexplicably irritated by his neighbor's meticulous lawn care. Through reflection, he recognized his irritation wasn't about the neighbor, but about his own disowned perfectionism, a quality his family had criticized in him as being too particular. Third, practice conscious differentiation, separating your projections from the actual person before you. This doesn't mean dismissing your feelings, but asking, how much of my reaction is about them, and how much might be about me? This practice requires developing a kind of dual awareness, simultaneously acknowledging your emotional reactions while questioning their source. With practice, you can learn to hold both realities. Yes, this person's behavior is challenging, and my intense reaction likely contains projection. Fourth, actively engage with your shadow through what Jung called active imagination, a practice of dialoguing with disowned aspects of yourself. Rather than encountering these qualities only through projection, relate to them directly within your own psyche through journaling, art, or imaginal dialogue. Finally, break patterns through conscious choice. When familiar dynamics emerge, identify your typical response and deliberately choose differently. Alex had a pattern of attracting emotionally unavailable partners, mirroring his relationship with his distant father. By recognizing this pattern and consciously choosing to date emotionally available people, even though this initially felt uncomfortable and not like chemistry, he eventually broke the cycle and developed a fulfilling relationship. What's noteworthy about Alex's journey is how unnatural the new pattern felt initially. Breaking psychological patterns often involves discomfort. What felt like chemistry was actually just the familiar activation of his abandonment complex. True transformation required trusting the process, even when it didn't produce the intense emotional response he mistook for connection. This raises fascinating philosophical questions about authenticity and identity. If our most natural feelings are often shaped by unconscious complexes, what constitutes our authentic self? Is it the familiar patterns that feel most comfortable, or the integrated self we're working toward? The paradox of self-awareness is that the very act of recognizing our patterns changes them. We can never fully know our unconscious dynamics without simultaneously transforming them through conscious attention. Consider this perspective shift. What if meeting the same people in different faces isn't a problem to solve, but an opportunity for growth? Jung believed that nothing in the psyche happens without purpose. The patterns we experience aren't random torments, but meaningful repetitions, designed to bring unconscious material into awareness. This teleological view transforms how we relate to recurring dynamics. They become invitations to wholeness rather than obstacles to happiness. The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed, Jung stated. Those recurring characters in your life, the critical authority figure, the unreliable friend, the competitive colleague, aren't appearing by chance. They're messengers carrying insights about your unconscious patterns, inviting you to greater awareness. Rather than viewing repetitions with frustration, approach them with curiosity. What am I meant to learn from this encounter? What aspect of myself is seeking integration through this relationship? This shift from frustration to curiosity transforms victimhood into an opportunity for insight and growth. This shift from frustration to curiosity represents a fundamental reorientation to life's challenges. Instead of asking, "Why does this keep happening to me?" we begin asking, "What might this be revealing to me?" This subtle shift transforms victimhood into an opportunity for insight and growth. This approach transforms how we view difficult relationships. The colleague who triggers your insecurity becomes a teacher, helping you develop authentic confidence. The partner who activates your abandonment fears becomes a guide leading you towards self-sufficiency. When we view relationships through this lens of meaning and purpose, even the most challenging dynamics can be approached with a sense of possibility rather than defeat. Each difficult encounter becomes not just a problem to solve, but a chapter in our larger story of psychological development, an opportunity to reclaim disowned aspects of ourselves and move toward greater wholeness. We've explored Jung's profound insights about projection, shadow, complexes, and the collective unconscious, concepts that help explain why we keep meeting the same energies in different faces. Perhaps the most transformative understanding is this: every relationship serves as a mirror, reflecting aspects of ourselves we might not otherwise see. This mirror isn't always flattering. It shows our unacknowledged shadow qualities, our unconscious patterns, our disowned traits, but it also reflects our unrealized potential, our forgotten strengths, our capacity for growth. The next time you find yourself thinking, "Why does this dynamic feel so familiar?" remember that you're being offered a glimpse into your unconscious mind. The external pattern points to an internal reality seeking your attention. By becoming conscious of these patterns, we gain the freedom to choose differently, to see others more clearly without the distorting lens of projection, to form relationships based on genuine connection rather than unconscious needs, to break free from limiting patterns that no longer serve our growth. This journey isn't easy. It requires courage to face our shadow, humility to own our projections, and perseverance to transform entrenched patterns. But the reward is nothing less than authentic relationship, with ourselves and with others. When we clear away the projections and complexes that distort our perceptions, we can truly meet others, not as screens for our unconscious material, but as they authentically are. This is the promise of Jung's psychology. Not just understanding why we keep meeting the same people in different faces, but transcending these repeating patterns to discover genuine connection. If you found value in these insights about why we keep encountering recurring relationship patterns, consider sharing this video with someone who might benefit from this perspective. Each time we bring unconscious patterns into awareness, we expand the possibility for genuine connection and transformation. What patterns have you noticed in your own relationships? What insights have you gained from recurring dynamics? Your experience might illuminate the path for someone else on this journey of self-discovery,